Our country was built upon many freedoms that we citizens make use of every day. One of the most important is the freedom to speak our minds and to hear others' opinions. It is called freedom of speech.
And legal argument there, which I accept. I mean, I think you have to distinguish between legal rights that we have and freedom of expression and the First Amendment are in fact enshrined in our Constitution and as something that we support here and elsewhere every day. What we're concerned about is there is the right, and then there's how you exercise that right. This is a potential action that has serious implications for U.S. interests around the world. It potentially puts American lives at risk. And when you balance out a right and a responsibility, in our view...
Well, lawyers get to express their rights to freedom of speech really in two ways. One is on their own behalf, just like any other citizen, and one is in court on behalf of others who might be in trouble in some way, whether criminally or civilly, for having said something that somebody felt was improper or against the law. And so we get to defend those folks and say whether it's protected by, argue whether that speech was protected by freedom of speech or not. Like, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, but there are a lot of things that people can say that others might find inflammatory. Things about the country, things about the president, but their right to say those things is protected. So we could do that, we could say those things ourselves as individually as citizens, or we can, in court, protect those people's rights and say that this, whatever they said that people found offensive or problematic, was protected by the right of free speech. And the right of free speech is very, very broad under the law. Very few restrictions on what can be said. So that's the advantage lawyers have. They get both their own rights as citizens and their right to defend others who are facing a challenge or a problem based upon something they said.
The right to speak freely is the most useful thing we have living in a nation where almost everything we say or do is observed, recorded, and documented. From the use of social networking sites to the major influence of the mass media, American citizens take advantage of their natural-born rights such as freedom of speech.
Freedom of expression is about us and other people who speak up and who write. But of course, bills of rights and freedom of expression is only very partially about us. It's actually about listening and reading. And if you go by numbers, it's far more about listening and reading than it is about writing and speaking, because there's a lot more people listening and reading than there are of us. So it is that whole thing. If you can't read and you can't listen, then your freedom of expression has been removed. It's not passive reading at all.
So, because it's relevant to the incident that happened here, freedom of speech. Ed and I have always agreed to defend freedom, even for controversial expression, which from some perspectives includes John Hughes' controversial views. And I just want to say, I'm sorry I didn't get to advise the protesters. I would have told them that standing there silently with placards expressing their viewpoint would have been protected free speech as we defended it at New York Law School.
So the bottom line is that I express it in two ways. In other words, what I have to say individually as a citizen, whether it's, now we're talking about outside of the courtroom, whether I'm giving a speech to somebody or just making an argument of a point within the law firm or to people in general. The other way I express it is in the courtroom, defending others' rights of free speech, and it is in the courtroom and the courts that define what the parameters of that is, so that it's not, you can't say absolutely everything you want, and it's the courts that define where those limits are. So both ways, both what I say on my own behalf and what I say on behalf of clients in court.
With John's point that we have to engage in a cost-benefit balancing, I completely agree with that. No civil libertarian, to the best of my knowledge, has ever argued that freedom of speech, freedom of religion, privacy are absolute rights. Rather, what we insist on is what the Constitution itself insists on, namely that there is a presumption in favor of privacy and liberty, and government can overcome that presumption only if it satisfies what we lawyers call strict scrutiny.
The First Amendment of the Bill of Rights guarantees us as American citizens a number of rights that no one can infringe upon. and we value them, but nothing is as valuable as the ability to speak freely. This project, where we openly convey our opinions, is even a form of free speech. One of the many great things about this country is the freedom that is inherent in becoming a citizen. We simply couldn't function without it.